Before we dive in, drop a quick hi in the comments. It may seem small, but trust me, it really helps YouTube share this story with more sci-fi fans like us. I'd love to see who's watching.
Saturn did not resist when we arrived. No primitive world ever does. The thought fluttered across Commander Vecheron's mind as his formation broke the pale light of Sol. The gas giant rose below them, a swollen sphere of muted golds and storm-scarred bands. Its rings shone like a slow blade turning under a sun too distant to warm. His species preferred higher skies than this, cleaner skies. But nothing in the Sakari territorium was achieved by preference. Territory was taken, not inherited. The Sakari fleet drifted into position with the effortless precision their doctrine demanded. 87 Spear-class carriers formed a crescent around Titan, each one gliding on wings of pale alloy, their hulls curved along elegant lines meant to reflect their own superiority. No alarms, no defensive batteries, no sensor grids, nothing but silence and the gravitational hum of an unclaimed world. Vecheron exhaled with quiet satisfaction. Even the Drakath, brutish as they were, mounted at least token resistance beyond their breeding grounds. But humans, if the scattered territorium profiles could be believed, barely understood their own solar neighborhood, half-blind primates, scrambling across a single blue rock, playing at nations, and conflict with the desperation of creatures who feared their own future. He studied Titan through the visor of the forward observation cradle. Orange mist churned atop the moon's methane pools, thick enough to swallow light. A place that should have offered challenge. Instead, it greeted them like an empty nest. Landing phalanxes deployed. An officer clicked behind him. Atmospheric interference minimal. No native scans, no transmissions. Humans appear unaware. Of course they are, Vecheron replied. Mark the moon. Titan enters the Sakari territorium. Ceremonial words, but tradition mattered. A world was not truly claimed until the territorium sigil had been spoken over its skies. Spear-class carriers descended through the haze with predatory grace. Bunker seats punched into the soil, their shells cracking open to reveal armored nodes and emitters that unfolded like metal plumage. Power lines burrowed downward. Sensor masts rose upward. The first territorium stronghold of Sol took shape under Saturn's rings without a whisper. Commander, the sensor officer called again, hesitation coloring the tone. A momentary echo on long-range gravimetric. Possibly debris. Possibly, Vecheron said, or a flaw in your calibration. Humans lack assets beyond their innermost worlds. Ignore it. Obedience followed. The Sakari were not a species that questioned their place in hierarchy. That alone set them apart from the Drakath, their closest rival in planetary conquest, whose chaotic reptilian war doctrine often bred insubordination within their own ranks. Below him, Titan bowed beneath Sakari structure. Bunkers spread through the mist. Patrol drones formed shimmering lines around the new outpost. A territorium foothold, clean, efficient, inevitable. Vecheron felt nothing but the steady certainty of victory. Far beyond Saturn's reach, Jupiter rose like a bruised colossus against the dark. Storms churned in permanent fury across its bands, each vortex larger than continents, each flash of lightning swallowed by the planet's monstrous appetite. To most species, it was a place without purpose. To humans, it was a shield, and a secret. Beneath Europa's ice, inside a chamber hewn from stone-hard frost, a man leaned over a trembling wall of silver-blue displays. No sound breached the room. The ocean overhead crushed everything it touched. It was the perfect vault for what Earth had built. Commander Lucan Wraith observed the incoming telemetry in silence, hands clasped behind his back. The hum of the Europa citadel wrapped around him like a living pulse. Quiet, disciplined, cold. Confirming multiple signatures near Saturn, Wraith's operations officer said. 70. No, closer to 80 vessels. War configuration. Wraith nodded. He let the data speak in its own rhythm. Mass readings, burn patterns, energy signatures, formation logic. The profile was unfamiliar, but the doctrine wasn't. It reeked of something polished, something certain of its superiority. "Transmission from Outpost 9, another voice said. "Encrypted. Eyes only." Wraith accepted the burst. A concise message unfolded across the display. No wasted words. His best observer had written it. "Saturn has been breached. Insertion underway. Hostile structures forming on Titan. Their deployment is organized, confident, and rapid. Awaiting instruction." Wraith shifted his stance slightly. He did not alarm easily. Fear was a luxury men in his position could not afford. But something in the pattern of those alien deployments struck him as familiar, not in species, not in technology, but in mindset. A doctrine shaped by long strings of victories. He keyed his console. "Prepare a primary packet to Earth. Tight beam, neutrino channel." "Content, sir. Everything. No emphasis, no anger, just the order." The Citadel stirred as though waking from a long sleep. Systems that had slumbered cold for decades shifted into warm state. Undersea conduits flared with light. Orbital assets pivoted on invisible trails. 1,000 motionless sentinels repositioned subtly above Europa's sky, adjusting by meters to account for new possibilities. "Commander," his comms officer asked, "should we elevate to Jovian lockdown?" "Not yet." Wraith's voice was calm enough to slow the air in the room. "But prepare the sequence. When Earth responds, we act immediately." His officers responded with crisp precision. In Europa Citadel, Wraith's word carried weight thicker than the ice above them. 5,000 kilometers below sea ice, deep under Antarctica, the United Earth Defense Center maintained a silence, broken only by the thrum of old reactors. The neutrino burst from Europa arrived without ceremony, just a coded blink on an unbroken line of hardened consoles. Director Samuels lifted the message tube, its lock chiming in acknowledgement. He read the contents once. His expression did not change, but the room seemed to constrict around him. "Bring the council online," Samuels said. Screens brightened. Faces appeared in compartmented windows. Military, civilian, scientific, all cross-checked and verified. They watched him without interrupting. "Saturn," he said. "Confirmed hostile incursion. Forward base on Titan. Multiple carriers. Intelligence suggests a coordinated species. Possibly territorial. Definitely expansionist." Murmurs sparked, but only briefly. "What's Europa's assessment?" someone asked. Samuels tapped the final line of Wraith's report onto the display. "Recommend immediate activation of Operation Backfall." The air in the chamber changed. Operation Backfall was not a plan. It was the plan, triggered only when the unthinkable had crossed into the real. Samuels nodded once. All in agreement? One by one, the windows turned green. "Then do it," he said. Lights dimmed. The bunker shifted to a deeper hum. Actual war had weight, and the Earth felt it. Codes were spoken. Seals unlocked. The planet exhaled a breath it had been holding for decades. Orbital stations powered up their kinetic arms. Lunar rail platforms slid from blackened cavities along craters. The ion-sheathed corridors beneath Earth's surface thrummed with the awakening of cryo companies. Soldiers stepping from cold sleep into the hard onset of purpose. Defense grids rotated. AI sentinels discarded their safeguard limits and entered active threat state. Operation Backfall had begun. On Titan, Vecheron studied the initial scans from the moon's surface. Calm, empty, unclaimed. Exactly as expected. His aide stepped forward. No resistance observed. Human response non-existent. "As it should be," Vecheron said, wings shifting slightly along his back. "Primitive species are predictable." He looked toward the distant speck of Jupiter, swollen and dim in the far sky. There was something faint about it, something he could not name. "Mark the next phase," he said. "Sol will fall cleanly." His certainty held firm. It would not last. The certainty Vesheron carried from the initial landing still lingered on the bridge. Sharp, clean, absolute. Titan lay quiet beneath the haze, its surface now marked by Sakari pylons and blinking beacons of the newly claimed Sakari territorium. His officers worked in efficient silence, convinced the Sol system would fold as predictably as every lesser world they had absorbed. Far beyond Titan, Jupiter hung as a vast, muted orb in the black. To the Sakari, it was simply the next planet in sequence. Nothing more. But beneath Europa's ice, humanity had already awakened. Europa Citadel did not roar to life. It unfolded with controlled precision, as though it had been waiting years for the quiet signal that now pulsed across its deep metal bones. Sleeper systems rose from black state. Cold reactors stirred. Pressure locks sealed. Observation domes dimmed to war-grade luminescence. Admiral Lucan Wraith stood alone on the upper tier of the Citadel's operations chamber, his silhouette framed by the slow-moving storms of Jupiter beyond the viewport. The light from the gas giant flickered across his uniform, carving a hard shape in the dim. A message blinked on his console. Short, classified, final. Operation Backfall authorized. Wraith absorbed the words without visible reaction. He had expected this moment since the day he accepted command of Europa. His hand tapped the console once, issuing the first series of activation orders. Across the Citadel, armored doors rotated into place. Troop carriers adjusted magnetic clamps. Cloaked orbital platforms began sliding from their resting cradles, silent as vultures rising into darkness. A cold mist drifted through the chamber's lower vents as thermal differentials equalized. Footsteps sounded behind him, measured, steady, familiar. "Admiral." Wraith turned. Lieutenant Corin Vance stepped into the tier's light, the frost of Europa's deeper corridors still clinging to the seams of his uniform. His face carried the pale calm of someone who had spent too many hours among shadowed machines and silent listening posts, watching for signals most humans didn't know existed. There was respect in the way he stood, not deference. Wraith returned it with an inclination of his head. "You came directly from Observation Vault 3, Wraith said. "Not a question." "Yes, Admiral. That vault is not a comfortable place." A small smile touched the corner of Corin's mouth. Comfort wasn't part of the design. "No," Wraith agreed quietly. "It wasn't." The screens around them flickered as long-range sensor feeds from the Jovian perimeter updated. Atmospheric distortions, plasma trails, hull signatures. The proof of what Corin had reported minutes earlier. A non-human force establishing itself on Titan. "You were certain the moment you saw their landing pattern," Wraith said. "I was," Corin answered. "And you identified them as Sakari." "I did." Wraith studied him for a long moment. Corin did not fidget. He did not fill silence with unnecessary words. He simply waited, calm, centered, lethal in his discipline. "You were part of Arc Segment 9, Wraith said finally. Corin offered a small nod. "Before the Citadel assignment." Wraith's expression didn't change, but something in the room felt as though it shifted into sharper focus. Arc Segment 9. The cell that had communicated with off-world species long before humanity had disclosed its existence to itself. The cell that received warnings whispered in fractured bandwidth from species who lived in fear of empires humanity had never heard of. Species who fled the Sakari territorium. "You have more knowledge about them than anyone else in the outer system," Wraith said. Corin didn't respond with pride, only truth. "Yes, Admiral." Wraith's eyes lowered to the console as a new sensor sweep displayed the territorium structures rising across Titan's surface, sleek pylons sinking through the crust, their architecture resembling folded metal wings. Corin stepped beside him. Every account we received from non-human sources described this exact sequence. Sakari arrival, Moonfall establishment. No communication. No diplomacy. They claim a moon before they claim a world. Wraith nodded. Why the moon? Symbolism, Corrin said. They believe every planet should be shadowed by their territory. The moons are the first act of possession. And their expectation now? A surrender message from Earth, Corrin answered. Within hours, sometimes minutes. Wraith's focus sharpened. Then they will not enjoy what we are about to send. He keyed a sequence into the console. A message appeared on the screen. 3 concise lines, the edges sharp enough to cut. You are inside our defensive perimeter. You have 2 hours to retreat. There will be no second warning. Corrin read it once. It will unsettle them. It will do more than that, Corrin said. They have never received a deadline. Wraith transmitted it. The message shot outward through the void, racing past Jupiter's magnetosphere, threading silently through Saturn's rings, and striking Titan's comms relay like a flint against iron. On Vesheron's flagship, the comms array chimed once, an unremarkable tone, the kind that usually announced submission. The bridge fell into composed silence as the translation came through. Then it unfolded on the display. You are inside our defensive perimeter. You have 2 hours to retreat. There will be no second warning. The officers did not speak. The silence held. An old Sakari doctrine whispered through the back of Vesheron's mind. Predators do not warn their prey. Prey does not warn predators. This message warned. A tactician swallowed. Commander, this is not surrender. No, another said. This is position. Assertion. Defensive perimeter, someone whispered. Around Jupiter? The idea was absurd. Impossible. Primitive worlds did not claim perimeters around gas giants. Yet the humans had said it. Plain. Flat. Without panic. 2 hours. A countdown. Vesheron's wings tightened behind him, a gesture his species rarely displayed. It bordered on instinct. But instinct was not doctrine, and doctrine dictated confidence. Prepare 3 wing scouts, he ordered. We test their claim. His officers obeyed, though not with the same crisp assurance they had shown minutes earlier. Europa Citadel registered the scouts the instant they broke Titan's orbit. Corrin leaned forward over the threat index array, voice steady. 3 signatures, light scouts, minimal shielding. They're approaching Jupiter at probe speed. Wraith watched the vector lines forming across the spherical display. A test. Yes, Corrin said. They want to confirm whether our perimeter is real. Wraith nodded. Then we'll show them without firing a shot. Perimeter pulse? At the threshold, Wraith confirmed. Not before. Europa's reactor hummed deeper, its core shifting into a slow-cycle energization. The cloaked grid adjusted in perfect silence, 1,000 hidden platforms reorienting through magnetic shadow. Corrin studied the readings, eyelids narrowing a fraction. They won't see the platforms, not with their scan frequency. They won't need to, Wraith replied. They'll feel the boundary. The scouts continued their approach, weaving through the upper currents of Jupiter's magnetosphere. Closer, closer. Threshold in 10 seconds, an officer said. Wraith didn't move. He didn't issue a dramatized order. And the boundary fired, not as a weapon, not as a threat, as a presence, a ripple, invisible to human eyes but unmistakable to Sakari sensors, spread across the void, an electromagnetic pressure wave shaped like a wall. The scouts shuddered mid-flight. On Vesheron's bridge, alarms flickered in confused patterns across the panels. A sensor officer's feathers lifted in sharp alarm. Commander, we crossed something. It wasn't physical, but it pressed against our systems. What kind of something? Vesheron asked, already tightening his grip on the command cradle. Field distortion, came the answer. Structured, deliberate, like a wall we couldn't see. Another officer's voice cracked. A defensive boundary, around Jupiter. Vesheron turned. Movements clipped. There is no record of humans establishing such a field. They do not possess. Commander, the tactician interrupted quietly. This wasn't an anomaly. A pause. It was a warning. 2 hours. The humans had spoken of a perimeter, and now the Sakari had found it. Back in Europa Citadel, Corin watched the scouts halt at the threshold, frozen in uncertainty, their formation disrupted. They felt it, he said. Good, Wraith answered. Let hesitation grow. Corin turned slightly toward him. This changes the tempo. Wraith allowed the faintest breath of acknowledgement. Their confidence just took its first wound. Below them, systems continued aligning, kinetic rails warming in silence, decoy arrays spinning up, deep ice barracks receiving deployment instructions. Not in panic, not in haste, in readiness. The Sakari will answer soon, Corin murmured. Yes, Wraith said, but not with reason, with pride. He looked toward Jupiter, its storm swirling in ancient patterns. 2 hours, he said quietly, and then this system stops being familiar to them. Corin stood beside him, silent, watchful. The scouts retreated a fraction. Wraith's voice dropped to a resonance that matched the hum of the citadel, a quiet, immovable truth. They expected surrender, he said. Instead, they found a boundary. Sakari ships moved like sharpened silhouettes across Titan's haze, each one sliding into position with the cold exactness of a hunting formation. Vesharan stood on the command deck without speaking. His earlier certainty had not returned, not fully, but doctrine pressed him forward. Doctrine did not bend for anomalies. 12 vessels detached from the orbital cluster and arced outward. A probe detachment, modest and dismissive by design. 6 scout cutters at the vanguard, 4 light warships behind them, and 2 command escorts anchoring the rear. Enough force to probe resistance, not enough to admit the possibility of real danger. Vector paths confirmed, a tactician reported. Estimated approach to Jupiter's boundary, 6 minutes. They will find nothing, Vesharan said, keeping his wings tight against his spine. A field and a warning are the gestures of prey. Test them, and they collapse. The others murmured agreement, but the confidence was thinner now. Even the hum of the consoles felt subdued. On the forward screen, the 12 vessels swept into their acceleration burn and vanished into Saturn's shadow. Beneath Europa's ice, the Citadel lights dimmed to blackout. Admiral Lucan Wraith stood before the primary operations sphere, his arms resting lightly behind his back. He did not pace. He did not raise his voice. Stillness radiated from him the way an event horizon radiates inevitability. Lieutenant Corin Vance stepped beside him, reading telemetry from the outer system pickets. The Sakari probe is committed, he said. 12 ships, mixed roles, standard doctrine. Wraith nodded once. Their scout cutters are fast? Fast enough to believe in themselves, Corin replied, and slow enough to die properly. Wraith allowed the smallest breath of amusement to pass across his face. Not a smile, a shift in gravity. Layer 2 backfall, he said to his operations officer. Bring it online. Above Jupiter, invisible lines snapped awake. Kinetic rails buried in the silence of Lagrange pockets. Dark platforms adjusting orientation by millimeters. Soft equilibrium breaking into lethal readiness. Nothing glowed. Nothing moved in a way a living eye could detect. The system whispered its intent only through calculations. Wraith watched the vector projections. They'll reach the gravity tripline in 2 minutes. They're scanning the outer perimeter, Corin said, looking for resistance where they assume it should be. Good. Europa's subglacial chamber vibrated faintly as relays locked into firing position. The Citadel's heartbeat slowed, calm and cold. The Sakari cutters reached the first threshold. From Titan, Vesharan tracked their telemetry. Each marker pulsed steady green. The scout commanders transmitted curt status updates. Nothing unusual detected. Boundary field stable. No sign of human vessels. Exactly as expected. Approach nominal, the sensor officer reported. "No anomalies." Vesharan breathed once, controlled. "Proceed." The probe fleet entered the kill zone. They never saw it coming. At L1, a motionless cluster of dormant spheres, sleeper mines, awoke. They didn't ignite. They didn't fire. They fell. A fractional drop in magnetic suspension let them slip from stillness, pulled instantly into Jupiter's gravity well. Each sphere carried a tungsten core and a microspike detonator keyed to proximity. The first Sakari cutter registered a faint chirp before the world folded inward. A silent flash tore across its hull. The ship collapsed like a crushed skeleton, its inner supports breaking in sequence before the remains spiraled downward toward the gas giant below. No sound, no flame, just a brief distortion, and then nothing. On Titan, the blip vanished. "What?" the sensor officer whispered. "Telemetry interruption," another said too quickly. But then the second cutter disappeared. Then the third. The officers on Vesharan's deck grew still. "That is not telemetry failure," the sensor officer said, voice thinning. "Commander, we are losing ships." "Identify the weapon," Vesharan snapped. "There's no energy signature, no radiation wake, no projectile track, nothing, just removal." Silence gripped the bridge. Vesharan's talons tightened on the command cradle. "Continue the sweep," he said. "Their death speed will reveal the vector." But the human traps were not done, not even close. Europa Citadel registered each kill as clean data. Impact, structural failure, loss of signal. An officer read the feed aloud with calm precision. 3 cutters neutralized, 4th about to cross the second trip line. Wraith waited. The cutter cleared the boundary, and a kinetic rod dropped from a killsat in polar drift, a tungsten spear falling at orbital velocity. It struck the Sakari vessel dead center, splitting it in 2 before its sensors detected the descent. The halves drifted apart, venting pale gas that crystallized instantly in the vacuum. 4, the officer said. Wraith's voice stayed level. Next. 2 Sakari light warships tried to break formation, wings flaring as they pushed into evasive spread. It didn't matter. A gravity sink trap, an engineered perturbation timed with Europa's rotation, tugged the first warship off its intended course. Only a deviation of half a degree, but enough. The ship crossed a mine glide trajectory. Pressure sensors activated. A directional blast cored the hull from stern to prow. The ship imploded. The second warship attempted a hard burn upward, straight through the A mark of a silent rail platform floating in Europa's magnetotail. The platform fired once. A slug no larger than a fist punched through the warship's drive assembly, severing power and control. The ship drifted helplessly until Jupiter's gravity pulled it down, down, down. An officer reported calmly, 6 confirmed kills. 7, Wraith corrected as a command escort flickered into fragmentation. The officer gave a small nod. "Yes, Admiral. 7. The remaining 5 Sakari vessels panicked. Their formations collapsed. Their lines bent inward, attempting to retreat toward Titan. Wraith watched without changing expression. "Let them run." Corrin tilted his head. "Not pursue?" "They must return with fear," Wraith said. "A wounded doctrine is more useful than debris." On Titan, chaos finally surfaced on the command deck. "Retreat signals from the survivors." "The escort is breaking rank. We've lost 7 ships, Commander. This is impossible." Vesharan stared at the battlefield map. Red markers flickered out faster than updates could stabilize. The motions he had expected, evasive spirals, counterfire, electronic jamming, none of them appeared. The humans hadn't engaged. They had predicted, plotted, prepared. A hunter did not do this. Prey did not do this. Something colder did. "Commander," an officer whispered, "we sent 12 vessels." Vesharan's wings rose a fraction, an expression of avian dread, and 5 return. "They are broadcasting distress. Their systems are failing. Some are venting atmosphere, and the humans did not show themselves. No, Commander. They never appeared. The bridge fell silent. For the first time, Vesharan felt doctrine tremble. Back beneath Europa's ice, Wraith sealed the citadel. All channels to silent mode, Wraith ordered. Blackout across the Jovian net. No transmissions, no telemetry. Nothing leaves our grid. Corin asked, "You want them blind?" "I want them thinking," Wraith said. "Silence terrifies faster than weapons." A beat of stillness. Then, "Prepare Asterion activation," he added quietly. "Let that be the only thing they notice." One by one, the Citadel's remaining signals collapsed into darkness. Platforms vanished from their own networks. Relay towers shut down. Artificial noise fields masked the system. Europa went still. Jupiter rotated, massive and ancient, indifferent to the war awakening around it. Corin stood beside the Admiral, reading the retreat vectors of the 5 surviving Sakari ships. They'll regroup, and they'll escalate. They will, Wraith agreed, but not cleanly. You wounded their doctrine. Wraith's gaze remained fixed on the hollow dark beyond the viewport. No, he said quietly. You did. Corin didn't answer. The hum of Europa's systems settled into a heartbeat cadence. The Citadel waited, calm, coiled, patient. On Titan, alarms shrieked. A sensor officer stared at his console, feathers raised high in shock. "Commander, new anomaly. Massive gravimetric reading behind Jupiter." "Classification?" Vesharan snapped. "Unknown. Origin? Unknown." "Is it human?" another officer asked. "No signature," the sensor operator breathed, "but something is shifting." "Shifting what?" "Gravity itself, Commander." Vesharan's wings locked rigid. The unknown reading grew, slow and immense, as if something unseen was rising from Jupiter's shadow, or gathering power within it. The human perimeter had been real. Their traps had been real. Their silence was real. Now something else was stirring. "Full battle posture," Vesharan ordered, voice cutting through the bridge. "All vessels in Titan orbit prepare weapons. Raise shields. Arm everything." Officers leaped to comply. The bridge lights dimmed to combat red. Outside, the gas giant churned, an ancient storm swallowing itself as though something beneath it was beginning to wake. And Vesharan felt, for the first time in all his years of conquest, a cold truth settle beneath his feathers. Saul was not falling cleanly. The first waves of panic never sounded on a Sakari bridge. Their species did not shout under duress. They did not break formation or voice fear. But they had tells. Small, rigid, betraying things. Feathers tightening against the jawline. Wings contracting in defensive curl. Silence growing too long. Vesharan saw all of it. The gravimetric anomaly behind Jupiter should not have existed. No primitive species possessed structures capable of shifting mass drift signatures across a gas giant's shadow. Yet the readings were undeniable. Slow, rising, immense. "Expand classification sweep," he ordered. "We have," the sensor officer replied, voice controlled but thin. "The anomaly remains unclassifiable. It behaves like a structure, Commander, but with no radiation, no thermal pulse, no hull reflections. Then it is not a structure. I cannot confirm that." Every officer glanced toward the viewport, though nothing could be seen. Jupiter's storms churned quietly, hiding whatever stirred behind them. "It is human," Vesharan said at last. Feathers rippled with disbelief. "Commander," an officer said carefully, "there is no record of a ground-breather species creating a gravimetric presence of this scale. It approaches planetary mass displacement. And yet," Vesharan replied, "it is here." He stepped forward, wings tightening against his spine. "Signal all Territorium-held vessels. Initiate phase storm. Full fleet mobilization. We eliminate the humans before this thing completes its purpose." The bridge lights shifted to blood-red combat intensity. The Sakari were going to war. Under Europa's ice, the Citadel breathed like a living organism. Every chamber sealed. Every transmission died. Every system sank into blackout discipline. Admiral Lucan Wraith stood before the operations sphere, with both hands resting against the cold metal console. Jupiter rotated on the projection wall, its storms illuminated in tactical overlays. Lieutenant Corin Vance watched sensor feeds threading silently across the lower displays. No chatter, no broadcasts, just pure data curves of Sakari movement. "They swallowed the bait," Corin said. Wraith nodded once. They believe the anomaly is a threat. To them, it must look like a Leviathan rising. "It is," Wraith said, "in a way." The hammer of Asterion had already begun to move. Its structure, 4 kilometers of tungsten lattice and magnetic containment rings, was rising from Jupiter's night shadow, slow and deliberate, like the awakening of a submerged beast. Gravity eddies swirled around it. Light bent where no surface existed. The labyrinth field masked its presence, but its mass no longer slept. "It won't stay hidden much longer," Corin murmured. "It doesn't need to," Wraith said. The Citadel dimmed further as power rerouted through subterranean conduits. Sensors tracked the Sakari fleet breaking orbit from Titan, a battle group far larger than the probe force. 30 ships, then 40, then 60. "They're committing everything." Corin's voice stayed calm, but something colder ran beneath it. "They mean to crush us before we can act." "Then we act first," Wraith said. He tapped the Asterion command interface, an ancient-looking black panel, unmarked, without light. It hummed once, as though the gas giant itself exhaled. Asterion's spine aligned. The rods locked into the firing rack. Jupiter's pull gathered. The hammer stirred. The Sakari battle group approached Jupiter with wings flared wide, weapons arrays hot and ready. They moved with the elegant unity of apex predators, lines clean, formation exact. But their scans faltered. Distances blurred, vectors shifted. Mass signatures looped around themselves. "Commander," a navigator said, "our drift sense is degrading." "That is the anomaly's influence," Vesheron said. "Stay focused." The senior tactician stared uneasily at the readings. "Commander, this scale of gravitational distortion, if the humans built something—" "Humans do not build artifacts of this magnitude," Vesheron snapped. "Whether is a weapon or not," Vesheron said, "we will break it." The fleet angled forward, wings rigid in attack posture, engines firing in synchronized arcs. 20 seconds later, Asterion fired its first verdict. No sound existed. No flash. No beam. No plasma arc. Just movement. A single 10-meter tungsten rod released from the hammer's lattice, dragged by Jupiter's gravity well, and then hurled outward by gravimetric levering. It hit escape velocity before it crossed 1 kilometer. Then 5 kilometers. Then 10. Sakari sensors registered a mass surge anomaly. They did not register a weapon. The rod struck the Lid warship without warning. A perfect entry wound. A clean exit. No explosion. Just a sudden absence where a warship had been. The ship split open, bleeding atmosphere in 2 clean lines. Its spine snapped, hull fragmenting into spirals. The crew never saw death coming. "Commander," several voices cried, "we've lost the Vanguard." "How?" "No energy signature. No projectile identified. It was—" The tactician stopped, then whispered, "It was velocity, Commander." Another rod fired, then another, and another. Asterion did not reload. Asterion recycled momentum. 10 rods fell in under 8 seconds. They punched through Sakari ships like needles through thin cloth. 12 vessels shattered. 3 collapsed into Jupiter's pull. 2 spiraled away, venting fire. On Titan, secondary command posts screamed for orders. On the flagship, Vesheron stood frozen. "This is impossible," an officer said. Inside Europa Citadel, Corin tracked the destruction with quiet precision. Rod 1, 4 kills. Rod 2, 2 kills. Rod 3, 1 kill, 1 destabilized. Rod 4, impact. Rod 5, impact. Wraith leaned forward. How many left? Approximately 25. Asterion? An officer checked the readings. Cycling for rapid release. It's pushing maximum vectoring. Wraith gave a slight nod. Good. The Sakari counterattack began. Without orders, 3 wings broke formation and fired plasma lances toward Jupiter's shadow, hoping to strike whatever was killing them. The beams vanished into the labyrinth field, absorbed, refracted, devoured. Asterion fired again. Another warship ruptured. 2 escorts split open. 1 scout cutter was hit so hard the impact spun it end over end until the ship's frame tore itself apart. Vesheron's composure cracked. "Withdraw," he ordered. "Fall back to safe distance." "Commander," the navigation officer said, "there is no safe distance." Vesheron turned toward him, feathers raised sharply. "The humans," he continued, "are using Jupiter. Their weapon is anchored in its gravity. Distance is irrelevant." It was the first time any Sakari officer had spoken the truth aloud. They all felt it. Asterion was not a weapon. It was a sentence. Back in Europa, alarms rippled through the lower decks. The officer's console flared red. "Admiral, Asterion's recoil dampers are overheating. Gravimetric resonance is rising across Ring 3. Compensation? No full compensation possible. The weapon wasn't designed for this firing rate. How long until failure? Minutes. Wraith's face remained expressionless. Then we finish before that. But Corrin wasn't looking at the weapon. He was looking at a different panel, where a single Sakari ship had broken formation and was accelerating toward Europa. "Admiral," Corrin said, "they've launched a cutter into the ice." Wraith turned to the feed. "Vector?" "Targeting the Citadel core," Corrin replied. "Straight trajectory. They're aiming for command infrastructure." Wraith's eyes narrowed. "Blackfall intercepts?" "Not at that angle," another officer reported from the lower tier. "Impact vector bypasses the outer grid. If it hits the labyrinth field spine during recoil, Asterion destabilizes," Wraith finished grimly. The operations tier shifted into motion. Commands relayed, defenses tightening. Sensor windows filling with descent data. The cutter moved fast. Too fast for clean interception. Wraith's voice stayed cold and level. "Redirect power to internal reinforcement. Hold the lattice field through recoil. We cannot let Asterion stutter." "Acknowledged," said the officer. "Field stability degrading. 12% variance." "Compensate manually," Wraith ordered. "Lock core calibration at pre-fire vector." "Working," the officer replied. "Field is holding. Barely." Corrin's voice cut in from the flank. "They're forcing us to risk the firing cycle. If the field cracks..." "We'll make sure it doesn't," Wraith said. He stepped to the central console, watching the cutter descend. Outside, Europa's outer shell groaned under impact stress. The lights on the tier dimmed. Asterion's spine wavered, but did not break. "Field integrity stabilizing," the officer confirmed. "Calibration locked." The cutter struck empty rock, off course by less than 40 meters. Close, too close. But the system held. Asterion stabilized. Wraith gave the order, "Bring Asterion to firing sequence." The hammer of Asterion fired its final barrage. Mass rods fell. A rain of silent death, no heat, no light, no warning, only gravity. Sakari ships folded, buckled or vanished into Jupiter's gravity. The remaining vessels broke rank, fleeing like scattered feathers on a violent wind. Vesheron's flagship barely escaped the second pulse. His doctrine, his certainty, his species' arrogance, shattered with every loss. "Commander," an officer whispered, "we must retreat." Vesheron did not argue. He simply spoke the words with a hollow that none of his officers had ever heard. "Signal the fleet," he said. "Fall back from Sol." The Sakari fleet limped back toward Titan in a trail of fractured formation and leaking light. Not one vessel flew with precision. Their wings sagged. No longer proud, aerodynamic crescents, but drooping veins pulled tight in a posture their species rarely showed. Fear. Vesharan stood at the front of his damaged flagship's command deck, staring across scarred consoles and flickering status walls. Of the 67 warships he had carried into Jupiter's shadow, barely half remained. None were intact. Some clung to life by failing hull seals and emergency grav pinning. Others drifted half-dead beside the formation, kept afloat only because the alternative was surrender. The Territorium command post on Titan hailed him before he crossed the moon's horizon. "Commander Vesharan," the transmission crackled. "Explain the loss." A dozen officers and strategists appeared on the hollow projection. Wings flared in traditional judgment posture. He could feel their contempt, their disbelief, the tightening feathers around their throats. He should have bowed. He didn't. "We were not defeated by force," Vesharan said. His voice was steady, but every word landed like the slow collapse of an old world. "We were outmaneuvered, outcalculated. The humans did not fight. They predicted." Cold silence met him. They wielded a weapon anchored in Jupiter's mass. We could not classify it. We could not target it. We could not see it, he continued. But it saw us. "And you allowed it to strike," one strategist hissed. "I did not allow it," Vesharan answered. "It struck regardless." This time the silence almost hurt. His final words carried the weight of an extinction no one wanted to name. We underestimated them. Humans, ground breathers, pre-industrial war caste. But their calculations were perfect. The Territorium command chamber erupted with overlapping demands. "Launch retaliation. Recover dominance. Demonstrate total superiority. End this humiliation." Then a single voice rose above the rest, hard and uncompromising. "Bring us Sol. Every wing, every ship, every fire vector. We will purge the humans from the sky." There was no room for dissent. Titan's Territorium was mobilizing for the final strike. Inside the Citadel, Admiral Lucan Wraith stood before the operations display, reviewing the aftermath. Emergency lights pulsed across the chamber, but there was no panic. Only sharpened focus. Asterion held. The Citadel endured. But they all knew what was coming next. Lieutenant Corin Vance stood nearby, reading telemetry from the outer system. His face was calm, the light from the screen catching in his eyes, but his jaw was tight. "Movement across the Territorium grid," Corin said. "Mass acceleration from Titan. They're committing everything." "Expected," Wraith replied. "They won't risk another miscalculation." He stepped toward the projection of Sol, glowing faintly above Europa's ice. "Pull blackout protocols. Let them see us." "Full transmission range?" Corin asked, already keying the command for relay unlock. "Full," Wraith confirmed. "They deserve to witness what stopped them." The Citadel brightened as its silent veil dropped. Asterion unfolded from the darkness beneath Jupiter, its true scale finally exposed to every Sakari sensor. Not a trap, a warning. "Open a line," Wraith said. "Direct to their flagship." The Sakari Armada surged inward from Titan, wings flared, weapons arrays burning blue-white, as it accelerated toward Jupiter. They came not to conquer, they came to erase. Vesharan stood on the bridge of his battered flagship, feeling every eye fix on him, not in respect, not in loyalty, in desperation. "Proceed," he said. The Armada advanced, but halfway to Jupiter, a transmission cut through every channel. Human, calm, unflinching. "This is Admiral Lucan Wraith of the United Earth Defense, Sakari Territorium. Acknowledge." No one on the Sakari bridge moved. Wraith's voice continued, steady as deep ice. "You were given 2 hours to leave our system. You stayed. That was 24 hours ago." Feathers tightened across the Sakari deck. "You expected us to bend," Wraith said. "Instead, you broke." Vesharan's breath caught in his throat. Wraith's tone didn't rise, didn't carry fury or pride, just the unbearable weight of a man who had counted every casualty. "We do not want your extinction," Wraith said. "But if you push forward, Asterion will fire, and the next verdict will not be aimed at ships." The Sakari froze. Wraith spoke again, quieter. "Your arrogance blinds you. You invaded our home believing us prey. You were wrong." For the first time in Sakari military history, officers shifted uncomfortably before their commander. Their feathers drew close, their wings trembled. Fear was in the room, not of humanity, of physics. Asterion pulsed once behind Jupiter like a heartbeat. Vesharan felt it through the deck. A signal, a promise, a boundary. And something inside him gave way. Not pride, not doctrine. Something deeper. "Commander," said his navigator, voice quivering, "we cannot face that thing." Another officer whispered, "We have families on Sakara. If we fail," and then a third. Humans offered a boundary. We crossed it. Vesharan lowered his head. "Admiral Wraith," Vesharan said, voice cracking, "your message is acknowledged. Signal the fleet. Sakari Armada, stand down." On sensors, hundreds of signatures flared as ships broke formation, weapons folding, wings retracting. Wraith's voice, quiet and steady, replied, "Transmission received." And just like that, the war ended. In silence, in surrender, in 24 hours. When the Sakari Armada withdrew beyond Titan, the Territorium dissolved. Their pylons were dismantled, their outpost abandoned. No Sakari officer dared speak of Sul in tones louder than a whisper. The myth of superiority, broken. The doctrine of conquest, shattered. The Empire, forced to learn humility. Vesharan returned home not as a hero, but as the only one willing to admit the truth. Humans drew a boundary, he told his people. We learned what happens when it is crossed. Later, Admiral Wraith stood once more in the Central Operations Tier, watching Jupiter swirl beyond the reinforced glass. The storm had passed. Asterion was silent now, its gravimetric readings low, its mass cooled, its shadow returning to stillness. Corrin stepped beside him, quietly reading the decay curve of the final shockwave. "No movement beyond Titan," he said. "They're not coming back." Wraith nodded once. "Not them," he said. "Others will come." Corrin looked toward the storm-wrapped gas giant, but Asterion's still there, watching them. "That's the point," Wraith murmured. "The weapon sleeps, the boundary holds." As the last Sakari ship vanished beyond the outer dark, Wraith stepped onto the observation deck and looked up at Jupiter. Vast, eternal, swirling with storms older than human civilization. Somewhere behind those clouds, Asterion floated in its silent vigil. Waiting, watching, dormant. A final boundary in a galaxy full of predators. Wraith exhaled, the weight of everything settling into his bones. And he spoke the words that would echo across every star system that ever learned the story of Saul. They came for Earth, thinking we would kneel. Now the galaxy knows we do not.
Hey there, space human. I'm really curious about your thoughts on this video. Drop a quick comment and let me know what's on your mind. Or just say hi if you prefer. Either way, I'd love to hear from you. Also, remember to check the pinned comment. Trust me, it's worth a look. Oh, and one last thing. I've chosen another video for you to watch. Just click the card here. Or here if you want the whole playlist. See you there.